Let's get to it. Let's welcome Keith Pompey back to Philly Pressbox Radio. Keith, welcome.
Hey, what's up, fellas? Thanks for having me on.
As always.
Hey, Keith, I love this time of year, early in the baseball season and the start of the NBA and NHL playoffs. The Sixers last weekend wrapped up what was by and large a very successful season, 54 wins. That's the most since 2001. Joel Embiid, a second straight scoring title. We think an MVP trophy coming his way. James Harden averaged 21 and 10. How would you assess this Sixers regular season, Keith?
You know, it was a success. I mean, when you think about it, think about it. Like they started off, they were 0-3, and they at one point they were 12-12, and fortunately for them that the Eagles were so great. Did I just say that?
But fortunately for them, I heard that. The Eagles were button on too.
I love it.
The Eagles were so great that like no one really noticed. I mean, they noticed, but they weren't complaining. So when you look at it, the Sixers, after that 12-12 start, for 2 months, they were the hottest team in the NBA. So with that being said, you have to say that this season is a success. 54 wins, the most since 2001. So you have to say it was a success.
Keith, do you think this team is as good as they appeared to be? It almost was like they were on cruise control for a good portion of the season.
You know what? Then we're about to find out, right? I mean, that's the thing, because as great as this season was, this is when it really matters now in the playoffs. It's all that matters. You know what? I think they can be. The thing that gets me is, you talked about Joel Embiid. He's playing great. James Harden, I think that he is the key. If James Harden continues to remain healthy, if he gets over that Achilles thing, and if he continues to be the facilitator, I think the 76ers are as good as we think they are. Now, if James wants to be the James Harden of old and is doing all these step back threes, then no, not at all. They're not gonna go far in the playoffs.
I admit it, I still often question just how good a coach Glenn Doc Rivers is when it comes to the rotation, closing out games, etc. Am I wrong to do that, Keith?
No, you're not. I mean, it's weird because, it's funny because I'm working on the story on Glenn Doc Rivers. He's kind of like an enigma in a way. Like he's a guy who, is going to go down as one of the all-time greatest coaches. A guy who's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. But when he's in your market and you're a fan of his team and you study stuff closely, is always, well, what happened with this rotation? How come he didn't call a timeout now? Like, how come he's not playing a younger guy? So, no, I don't think you are. I just think you're wrong for that. I think that, these are questions that have to be answered. And also, let's be real. The last time that he's made it to the conference finals was when he was with the Boston Celtics. And that was, years ago. So I think that, it's logical to question him right about now.
Yeah. What do you think going into the playoffs, Keith? We've talked about this throughout the season. Chet and I have. Joel can score 40 or 50 probably any night that he wants to. But the team is better when he's scoring 30 and two other guys are scoring 20 or three other guys are scoring 20. Do they need to spread it out, or are we going to see a whole lot of the Joel Embiid show?
They need to spread it out. It's funny. I think that, there comes certain times when he starts pressing and it's a close game, and then all of a sudden we don't see that ball movement the way it is. But it's one of those bizarre things where they always, after they lose, they always lose the same way. There's lack of ball movement. Is Joel with a bunch of points and Tobias with none, things like that. But they always have the right answers after the game that, hey, we'll get it right. We know what we need to do. So you are correct. I think that in order for them to win these games, and they know it, especially in the first series, I think we are going to see a lot of ball movement. I do. I think we'll see a lot for that one. But when they go up against Boston, if they get there, I believe that we're going to see Joel being extremely ball dominant, so to speak.
I want to ask you about the depth of the Sixers. House, Melton, B-Ball Paul, Shake Milton, George Niang. A lot of names. Sometimes they're pretty good. Other times they're not. Am I right? They're very inconsistent, those guys.
Extremely inconsistent to a point where when you look at it, there's only three guys that I see who are probably at this particular time are going to be consistent rotation players, and one of them is DeAnthony Melton. The other one is Jalen McDaniels, a guy who
Yeah.
wasn't even mentioned. And then I think that you're going to see George Niang in there in the beginning. But the problem is, they talk about two-way players and that they got most of them. Well, these two guys I just mentioned are, but then George Niang, he struggles mightily on the defensive end. He tries, but he struggles. So I feel like that could be a problem, and you may not see him, and then they have to throw someone else in there.
And as we bend down and you get deeper into the playoffs, that's certainly not going to help you down the stretch. You gotta have more contributions.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You need a lot more contributions. Now, also, the one thing that's the saving grace that may help them is that they're going to try to reduce their rotation, you know what I mean, as the further they advance in the playoffs. But at the same time, I think the problem with the 76ers is outside those two guys that we talked about, when you look at their bench players, now you do have B-ball Paul Reed, who's aggressive. But outside of those two and maybe Paul a little bit, the rest of them are like specialists. Like Shake Milton could come in and get you buckets, but he's not going to lock down anybody. George Niang gives up as many points as he scores. Um, Daniel House Jr. is extremely inconsistent. So, that's where the problem lies with the 76ers. They just don't have a lot of guys that they can depend on to give you consistent minutes, like Chet said, with this bench.
So we finally have the schedule. We knew they were going to play game 1 on Saturday. They played game 2 on Monday. Then they're on the road, but not till the following Thursday for game 3. What do you know about? Well, you know them very well. The Brooklyn Nets. They're certainly not the same Nets team that we thought we were going to see when the season started. Are there going to be any match at all for the Sixers? 5 games tops, right?
It could be, yeah. I mean, it could be 5, it could be 6. See, here's the thing that gets me with this team. This team on paper, you look at it and you say no KD, no Kevin Durant. No Kevin Durant, no Kyrie. Ben Simmons isn't doing anything. He lost his position. You laugh at this team, right? But then when you look at it, this is a team that when they played the 76ers, not on Sunday, but the third time that they played them, that was Mikal Bridges' first game, Cam Johnson's first game, and it was like the two other guys that they just traded for their second game. And they should have defeated the Sixers, right? So when I look at it, I look at this team as having a good chance of still in game 1. And the reason why I say that is they know how to scout the Sixers. I don't think the Sixers really know how to scout these teams. Now, again, this is the NBA. You have a scouting department. You do everything. But I feel like real time on the floor, you can't you can't duplicate that. So I feel like that the Sixers may take them a game or two to figure this squad out. And with that being said, the Sixers could possibly lose a game early on. I look at this team, and I'm sorry for being long-winded, but you have Mikal Bridges. You have a bunch of 6'7", 6'8" guys who can switch and change different positions. And you have 6 or 7 guys who are legitimate three-point shooters. And when we look at the Sixers, as good as they are, they struggle in perimeter defense. So I feel like they will win because they have Joel Embiid, but I wouldn't be surprised if they lost game 1.
And you wrote a great piece today that you shared with us today. I guess that hit the papers sometime today on talking a lot about this. And you also mentioned that this should be an easy Sixers win series. Does overconfidence come into play at this point? I mean, on paper, this is a win series, but there's reality.
Oh, yeah. Overconfidence comes in a lot because you look at it, and it's easy to get overconfident because, look at Joel Embiid. You look at his size, you look at his height, everything, MVP, I'm saying he's going to win it, right? So you look at him and then you compare him to Nick Claxton. Now, Nick Claxton is one of the league's best rim protectors, But you like Joel's going to destroy that guy. You look at James Harden, Tobias Harris, all these guys, Tyrese Maxey. You're saying like there's no way in heck this team can compete with them. And people, we forget 2 years ago or not 2 years ago, but when they had Jimmy Butler and JJ Redick and all them, it was the same thing when they played the Brooklyn Nets. They all thought that they were going to destroy the Brooklyn Nets because the Sixers beat up on them all year. And what happened? They lost game one because they were overconfident. And then they woke up and then they smacked them. They smashed them the other games. But yeah, overconfidence can I mean, we can talk to her blue in the face that this team is good, but they're looking at them like, no, it's not KD and it's not Kyrie.
Well, we're going to assume they're going to beat the Nets, whether it's 4 or 5 or 6 games, and then it will almost certainly be the Celtics in round 2. Why do the Sixers seem to not match up very well at all with the Celtics?
It's weird. I think that when you look at the Celtics have, when you look at the Sixers in general, they tend to struggle against opposing perimeter players who can create their own shot, can score a lot of points, right? And then when you look at the Celtics, who are their 2 best players? 2 opposing perimeter players who can create their own shot. And that's probably, they don't get a lot of credit, but that's probably the best guard small forward tandem in the NBA right now, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So that's it. But not only that, they have a couple of other guys like Al Horford's a pretty good defender. Robert Williams III is a great defender. And then you got a guy like Malcolm Brogdon coming off the bench. And the one thing I will say about the 76ers is that the thing that they don't do well at, and we said this, I said this before, is perimeter defense. And what happens is Boston has a habit of bringing the big out and having them shoot threes from the perimeter. And the Sixers act like they never seen that before. They don't even go out there and guard them and defend it. So that's partly why they're such a bad matchup. And then another thing they do, since they're so athletic, we're used to seeing Tyrese Maxey running circles around people. Well, it seems like these guys, they kind of know how to shadow him, make sure he doesn't get in his spots. So they take him out of his game and they take advantage of Joel staying in the paint and they just hit a bunch of threes.
Hey, Keith, I'm going to toss this up. We have a question that came up here. Who does Keith like coming out of the West?
That's a great question because I think the West is wide open. And, I'm just saying this right now. I know that a lot of people are looking at the Golden State Warriors and they're saying they're the number 6 seed. But when I look at it, I think that the Golden State Warriors, if healthy, they have a legitimate chance. Now, again, they do struggle on the road, but I think they have a legitimate chance. And the reason being is, they're going to play Sacramento. And then after that, I think, they'll play the winner of, the Grizzlies and the Lakers, right? So I feel like that they can go to the conference finals. And once they get there, they're going to be fine.
Anyway, I really hope this isn't something that we do have to deal with. But if the Sixers do suffer yet another second-round defeat, does Doc Rivers come back? And will James Harden perhaps go somewhere else?
I think if they do suffer another second-round defeat, Doc Rivers probably would be gone. It's one of those things where somebody has to be the fall guy, right? And it's typically the coach. The thing about Harden, I don't really know, man. You hear – sometimes I'm thinking that he's just saying that because he wants to make sure that they're going to pay him. But at the same time, it's kind of like if they do go out in the second round, they're getting older. Guys are going to want to leave. Joel might get a little frustrated saying, where are we going? What are we doing? I don't know if Tobias will be here long term. So that could have Harden leaving out the door.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, Keith, about James Harden again. Are you surprised at the season he had? I mean, he's had a great season. Did we think he was much further down the road than what he showed this year?
I think James Harden is extremely smart. That's what I'm going to say. Because if you notice, whenever James Harden tried to play the way he was playing last year or trying the way he played before, he struggled. I think that James is like he basically reinvented himself to where now, don't granted he's in better shape, but he reinvented himself to where he could be more of the facilitator and feed Joel Embiid, because 4.8 of his assists go to Embiid. So that's heavy dosage, right? So I feel like James was smart enough to know that he had to switch up and be a different style, play a different style of basketball to to continue his stretch of being an elite player seasons.
All right, Keith, I got to ask you, how far do the Sixers go in the postseason? You know I had to ask you that question.
I think they get bounced in the second round. I do. I mean, Doc and them are confident and everything, but I don't know, man. I look at the Boston Celtics and I look at the Milwaukee Bucks, and we're talking about the 76ers bench where we only have like two guys that we say are two-way players and can be consistent. I just don't know if I could see them beating the Boston Celtics in the second round.
And if that were to happen, Keith, we said about Glenn Rivers probably gone. Do you blow the whole thing up?
I think long and hard about it. I would, because we think about it. This will be 10 years for 10 years since the process started, right? This will be the 10th season. And the reason why they started the process was to get out of the second round. Yes, they had regular season success. However, you got James Harden, you got Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, all these guys getting paid. You got Doc Rivers getting paid, Daryl Morey getting paid, and you still only got to the second round. So I think something has to change.